says live.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Okie dokie. Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
I'll be
I was like, the weird digital handoff is happening, Jenny. I was like, Genergy. That's like my
The
favorite thing to
Genergy
say.
is bubbling up.
I know. Jenny, introduce
Jen.
yourself. I know. I'm like, it's so exciting.
Hi, I'm Jenny Holiday. I am a romance novelist. I live in Canada.
We're
I had
going
a
to do a
book out
fun thing
today.
later about Canada.
Okay.
Jenny and I, so I'm Jen Reads Romance, everybody. You had a big, exciting day today. Your book came out, so we're going to talk about
Mm-hmm.
your book.
Yeah, Paradise Cove came out today. It's the second book in a series called Matchmaker Bay, which is set in. I like to think that I'm pioneering a subgenre of Canadian beach romances. Most people are surprised that there are beach towns in Canada, but there are on the Great
Not me.
Lakes.
Great Lakes, great times.
Right. So this town is set on the shores of the Great Lake Huron. Um,
Like Michigan would like a
and
word.
yeah, yeah.
Although
Well,
Lake Superior has the best Twitter account. I don't know if you know that at all.
I grew up in Minnesota, so I also have a fondness for Lake Superior.
So, Jenny, we're going to talk about your books. We're going to talk
Okay.
about your dad. We're going to talk about Canada because I just feel like I love your dad so much. We're going to talk about Canada a little bit and Chicago. So here's like a funny thing about everybody should know. Maybe they know if you follow us. We live in Chicago, my family and I, but we love Toronto. It's one of our favorite cities, and we used to go there back when you could leave the United States, fine. And we love Toronto so much, but my husband started calling it clean Chicago, or yeah, clean Chicago, because Chicago is a very lovely city, everybody. I'm not saying it's really dirty, but Toronto is delightful. And so sometimes now Jenny calls Chicago dirty Toronto, which makes me laugh, right? So we have a shared love of the Great Lakes, of living in big, awesome cities, and of your books. I don't know if you love them. I mean, you write them, so you must love them.
I love them, I guess, enough at the right times,
Sure, fair enough.
and then
Okay,
I get over it.
yeah, well, it's got to be hard. So, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, E is reading is going to be manning the chat for me. So, I think you can actually just like respond there, and then she's going to just be filtering them to me. So, if you have questions you want me to ask Jenny, we think we've figured out a way to do that. It's very hard for me to do two things at once, everybody. So go ahead and you can ask the questions in the YouTube, or you can also DM them to her. She's on Twitter at E is reading. And it might be like while she's talking that things come up, and that's totally fine too. We are going to play a game in the middle. I have a game prepared. It'll be fun and short. Everyone knows I love to play a game on Zoom. And then we'll take some questions at the end. So, Jenny, I really loved this book. Oh God, I really love this book. So you mentioned a little bit like this Lake Huron beach town. Um, what it feels like a little bit of a departure, right? Like in your previous series was not like a small town romance. You've written a
Right,
lot of that is set in Toronto.
right.
So can you talk about like what made you want to tackle like this setting?
I actually had the idea for the series years ago, um, and like worked it up pretty far along, and
Okay.
then never did anything with it. Like showed it to my agent, but kind of put it in the back pocket. Decided it wasn't the time for that. Um, so at the end of my last series, I was sort of just chatting with my editor, and they were saying, we really, we think small towns are hot right now. And I said, actually, what if can it be a Canadian small town? Can it be on a lake? And it was kind of like humorous actually, because I went, boom, here you go, here's a proposal. It was ready to go.
Nice.
Um, but that doesn't really answer your question of why. I think it's because I really love the um, town. Like this place isn't based on one single town. It's kind of an amalgam of a few different ones. Actually, some of them on Lake Erie.
Hmm.
But I love beach towns.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I'd want to live in one, but I love them, and I'm fascinated by, especially the Canadian beach town, the seasonality of it, because there's tourists in the summer, but then there's a core of people who live there all the time. And I've just always been really interested in what that must be like.
Whoops.
That's my phone, sorry.
It happens.
And I kind of wanted to play with the idea of like the rhythm of a place that doubles or triples or quadruples its population in the summer, and what that's like.
Well, and what's interesting is, so I've read both books in the series, and like a lot of the world building of the town actually happens in book 1, right? And it's not that book 2 is like unreadable without it, right? It's not like that, but a lot of the sort of like the rhythm of the town, the seasonality, just gets sort of laid down in book 1. Was that on purpose, or did you find that you like it felt repetitive to do that, like to sort of revisit that, or like I just felt really different in terms of like how the setting worked in some ways?
I don't think that I did less world building in this book on purpose. I did learn as I wrote this that for me, the world building of a small town series was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. And it still is a source of a lot of stress to me. And I think it's because all of my previous books were set in a big city. So if you needed something to happen, like, I need them to get really dressed up and get stranded somewhere. There's a work event or whatever. You can just do it. But in a small town, if it's not already there, you can't be like, and by the way, I haven't told you this yet, but down the road there's a whatever,
Right.
You can do a little bit of that, but you can only get away with so much of that. So I think I ended up doing a lot of world building in the first book. The first book had a much heavier edit, and it needed it than this book.
Okay.
And I think part of it was because I was struggling so much with the world building. In book 2, I guess I did worry about the line between if people are coming in and they haven't read the first book yet. I thought it was actually pretty repetitive, so I'm glad to hear that you think that I wasn't.
Yeah,
and I kind of made the conscious decision that we're not going to revisit like every character in every place, because then it just becomes almost like a catalog,
Right. No, and I thought I also wonder, like, when you pitch a series, right? Like, how does your vision for what, like sort of what's in the pitch change when you're actually writing it? And I wondered if that's something that happened, right? Like, were these characters kind of what you expected, or did they surprise you?
They were what I expected, particularly this book. This is my favorite book in the series. And while I was struggling with book 1, with the world building of book 1, I used to like joke with my editor, because I would work on book 1, but then I called it cheating on book 1. I'd sort of do little bits of book 2, and I don't usually write more than one book at a time. But 2 was just like easy and a relief, and 1 was hard. So the characters in this book are kind of exactly the way I imagined them. And I think this series was pretty well thought out. It's not that things didn't change, but I tend to overwrite my proposals, because it's easier to write the book then.
Sure.
So they were pretty much what I thought they were going to be.
Okay, so let's talk about Nora and Jake then. Because this book, like, I think you saw me say this on Twitter, like, it devastated me. Like, everyone reading, watching at home, I don't cry a lot during romances. Like, I love feelings, but I don't feel like I'm usually like, and I cried a lot in this book in a way that I found really cathartic, but also just like really, it was so beautiful. So, it felt also like but it still was funny. I think like there's if someone asked me like, who's someone that you think routinely writes funny books, I'd say Jenny Holiday, right? But this book was so like infused with like loss and grieving, and I wondered, like, did that feel harder for you to do something that felt kind of so different to me as a reader? I
don't have a great answer for that. I'm a pretty like organized writer. I don't plot the whole book, but I kind of know what's, the big beats of a book are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had two books in my career where it was like already in my head in a way that I just kind of had to sit down and write it. This was one of them. And those books I think are my best books. They're my best reviewed books. But I don't know how I don't know how it got to that point where it was so fully formed in my head that all I had to do was write it. Yeah. So I didn't like set out to think, oh, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to, write
Make
about loss
cry.
and grief. Right. I just, and I like, you know me, I don't like to, like this kind of like woo-woo-ness makes me, like I don't, no offense to anyone who does this, but like I have a pet peeve where people talk about, my characters talk to me and my muse, and like that just annoys me. It's just not what I'm like. But
you're the boss.
This book, well, like it's not usually some mystical thing, right?
Right.
It's work, but it's satisfying work, but it's work. But this book just kind of like happened, and I think while I was writing book one, I would like my whole life ever since I've been a kid, when I fall asleep, I actually resist falling asleep, which is not a good thing to do. And I would tell myself stories in my head. And as an adult, those stories have become my books. But this book was sort of like in my head at night for a year. And I don't know, like I spent more time thinking about this book than the book I was supposed to be writing. So I think when it was time to write it, it just kind of barfed out.
So here's what's interesting, and this is like going back to a conversation you and I had like at RWA, I don't know, maybe a year ago, or maybe it was in Denver, where when book 2 of when Wendy's book was coming out, I think I remember you saying that was like a hard book to write.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And this one was an easy book to write. And and then I found myself wondering, like, is the middle book in a series, like, is there a pattern, or is it just like, it just depends?
The middle book in a series is usually good for me.
Okay.
That book you're talking about was the exception.
Okay.
But this is a middle book. It's my favorite. The series before Bridesmaids, that was a 4-book series, but the second book was my favorite. And I have a series coming up where I'm working on book 2, and it's a delight. I don't know. I think book 2 is actually my sweet spot, just not that book 2.
Oh, that's interesting, right? I mean, I wonder. Well, here's the other thing I was thinking about, because I'm always looking for patterns, right? So and you don't have to necessarily talk about them together, but I was finding myself thinking about like friends to lovers as a trope. Because that book was, and this book is, although it really plays out in a different way. I feel like traditionally friends to lovers, they're already friends, right? Like page 1 opens. And so this really goes against type. They're friends first, but they meet, right, on, page 1. It's not like they are already friends. So how did that change, like, the beats of a friends to lovers romance, or did it not? Was it just a different?
I don't think I've ever written a true friends to lovers in the way that you're talking about it, where they've been friends for a long time. I've written friends to lovers, and I think those, even though I don't think of that as my favorite trope, I think my most successful books are friends to lovers. But they always, I'm trying to think, I don't think I've done one where they have a long history of being friends. And I think it's just because it's not my first choice as a reader.
Right.
I'm a little bit like what is so different now? Like it makes me suspend my disbelief. I can do it as a reader. Like there's a lot of great writers who I'll eat it up, but I guess I don't think that I'm that's like too advanced class for me, or I'm not interested enough to try to make people who have known each other forever suddenly fall in love. Right. So I like the friends to lovers where they meet and there's some kind of spark there, but there's some reason that they're not going to get together.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just like, because I mean, I think of Wendy, I mean, I guess kind of, right? She's certainly friendly with him. It's like her best friend's brother or whatever. I mean, so I feel like the long history as opposed to.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe that, but I feel like that one was a little different, I don't know if I would call that friends to lovers. But.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm always like, yeah, like, I feel the same. It's like a hard trope for me. And it's not because I just think it's the reason it changes has to be something believable to me. It's not that I don't think people can't fall in love after being friends. I'm just always really curious about the catalyst, I guess.
Well, and I can't,
Yeah.
I also strongly dislike and have never written Second Chance. Although
Yeah.
my editor will call Second Chance adjacent. But I think I think it's honestly a character flaw. Like, I just don't have any interest in
Yeah.
either
Well,
my own life or in fiction. Like, if it's done, it's done. I'm done.
I think,
Scorched earth.
I'm the same way. I feel like, again, it's really hard because I feel like when it doesn't work for me, it's like one person's essentially just been in stasis. And I'm kind of like, that's not how life works. Like, right? Like, you change, you grow, and then, but it's sometimes, I mean, I'll say this: when it works for me, I'm surprised by it. I'm like, oh, that worked.
Right.
It's not
and
really
it's not
something
right. I just don't have a huge like doing it myself just feels like, I wouldn't do that in real life, so I don't want to spend 6 months writing about it.
Fair. Okay, let's take a pause and play my little game.
Okay.
I'm very excited about it. Okay, so I'm gonna like share my screen. Oh wait, hold on. Those are my questions. It's really pretty goofy. I'm excited about it though. Everyone knows I love a game. I think this is the teacher in me. Okay. Do you remember, Jenny, the TV show Remote Control on MTV? Do you remember that?
No, because we didn't have cable.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going
to
explain this very funny game to everybody, which is, this was like back on MTV in the 80s. It was the first like pop culture video game. And they had a really funny bit called Dead or Canadian. And they would like name a famous person, and it was like Michael J. Fox, and you would say whether or not they were dead or Canadian, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so we're not going to do that exactly. We're going to play a game called Chicago or Toronto.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and for each question, the answer is either Chicago or Toronto. That's it. It's really simple, like, right? It's
all right.
Real binary. You can do it. Okay. So here's question number 1. Which city has the largest population?
I don't know, but I'm gonna guess Chicago.
It's Toronto, actually.
Oh.
Toronto is like twice as big almost. It has a population.
Well, okay, so I think it would depend on how you're defining the city, right?
Well,
like the greater area.
Like, it was actually like the actual city, not like the Chicago land is what they call us and all the suburbs. And I don't actually know what that is.
Because Toronto, I'm going to geek. I come from like an urban planning background, so I could talk about this for a long time, but Toronto amalgamated with its former suburbs in like the 90s. So you might be comparing apples to oranges.
No, I think I'm comparing, well, maybe I am, but I like in terms of like city, I thought I just looked up cities. Well, now I'm going to have to find out later. It's me. Okay. All right. Which city has the biggest area? And here's the map so you can kind of see.
Oh boy. I'm gonna go with Chicago.
So this one, it is Toronto, but it is so close. It's within 10 miles.
Wow.
Chicago's, I did this in miles. Oh no, yeah, I did it in miles. Chicago's square is 234 square miles, and Toronto is 243.
Okay.
They're like practically twinsies. Okay. Which city has a higher average snowfall?
Oh, I think that has to be Chicago.
It is actually, let me look. I'm like, I don't remember. It is Toronto again.
Oh my God,
That's okay. This is really, I was like, no one would know these things. I was just being silly.
It's funny because I feel like it doesn't snow that much in Toronto.
Well, it doesn't really snow that much in Chicago either. Because I think you were both on like the upward side of
whatever side of the lake, yeah.
So they're, again, pretty close. 91 centimeters a year. I put that one in metric for you. In Chicago and Toronto is 121.
Okay.
Average. That's average. Could be a lot more, a lot less. Okay. Which city has, this one was like real dumb and sporty. My husband suggested it.
Oh yeah, I won't, this will be a total guess for me.
Okay. City, like you have stadiums with more than 20,000 seats. Chicago,
okay, I'm going to just keep going with Chicago.
You're right.
Because eventually it has to be right. Yeah, there you go.
We have 5. You guys
because we don't have, we have baseball and
and
hockey and basketball.
Yeah.
which
So
I guess is everything.
Yeah, but we have those, but then there's also some like just
but you have like
random
multiple of some of those teams, right?
I don't know. Nobody has those teams anymore.
True
okay.
enough.
Which city did Keanu Reeves live in?
Toronto.
He did. And we all love Keanu.
Can I do can I pause and say one thing?
Yeah.
That's a little bit like shamelessly self-promoting here.
Please do.
I have a Facebook reader group that is joint with my fellow Canadian rom-com authors, Jackie Lau and Farah Heron, and we spend a lot of time in that group talking about Keanu Reeves, and we loved him before. What was the movie called with Ali Wong?
Oh, right.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Anyway, we loved him before the Keanu-sance happened. And if anybody wants to come in, join us and talk about Keanu. We also talk about donuts a lot. It's called Northern Heat on Facebook.
There you go.
And we love Keanu. We love him. He's from Toronto.
I mean, who doesn't? Look at that man. I just thought that was like a good one. I was like, oh, look, I was kind of like famous citizens. And I was like, oh. Okay, which city is closer to Miami?
All right, so this is going to be a trick question. It's probably going to be Toronto.
Let me see. I actually wrote this down. It is Chicago, but again, not by much. Listen to this.
See, because what people don't know is that there's like this little finger of southern Ontario that dips way down into.
Go around.
Because
Toronto now again, I think it was driving distance as opposed to like air. Maybe I did this wrong, but whatever.
No, I'm sure you're right. I grew up in Minneapolis, and then I moved to Toronto, and everyone kept going, how's the weather up there? And Toronto's actually south of Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 1,379 miles for Chicago and 1,486 for Toronto. So again, like really close. Okay. Which city has more skyscrapers?
I have no idea. I'm going to say, I'll go with... I'm going to go with Chicago again.
It is true, but I read some big article that said that if all the current proposed skyscrapers for Toronto get built, you will surpass us.
Yes.
But that's like...
cranes everywhere in Toronto. I mean, there used to be. I mean, who knows now? But
yeah. So, right. Well, again, of course, I'm like... So, right. Here's like what right now, Chicago has 126 skyscrapers, 19 proposed or under construction, so a total of 145. Toronto has 67, 31 under construction. That's a lot, but 59 more that are proposed. So if those
Toronto's
all get built,
booming. Or was booming. I mean, again, it is. Who knows?
I know. I'm like all these crazy things. Okay, I found this real goofy website. This one's a total slam dunk, Jenny. According to Numbeo, which city rates higher as being more dirty and untidy?
Well, I mean, I think according to my other source, aka you, it's got to be Chicago. Although I haven't found Chicago to be very dirty when I visited.
It isn't at all. Actually, like the numbers are very close, but I just thought this was funny. I was like, it's a softball for you. Okay. There's only two more. Which city is the windiest?
Chicago.
It actually is Toronto.
Yeah.
The average wind speed of Toronto is 11.4 miles an hour, and Chicago it's only 10.3. As told.
I like how every answer of mine is Chicago, and it's always wrong.
Well, this one I totally like. Everybody would get that wrong. Chicago's the windy city. It turns out it's not. Which city has more beaches?
Toronto.
So you should have gone with Chicago again. We actually have 24 beaches. Toronto only has 11.
All right. Well, luckily I'm better at writing books than I am at quizzes about
our fair cities. I know. I was totally like, whoop, this would be so silly, but I think it would be great. Okay, so the name of the movie with Keanu Reeves is It's Always Be My Maybe.
Yes.
E told me. Thank you, E.
Yes.
Okay, so Jenny, can we talk about your dad? Because I love him.
Yeah.
As like a character in your life and a real person. So tell us about your dad.
Did you meet my dad when he was at RWA?
Yes, I did. There were donuts.
Right, because I think because he's in Minneapolis, or he's outside Minneapolis, that you maybe had the Minneapolis-Chicago kind of chat.
I think so. Or I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I forgot. Yeah.
I don't think I know that you did that. I'm just projecting that that's probably what you talked about. No, my dad is like my biggest fan, and I don't mean just as an author. He's just that way with my sister and I. He was one, as you know, and my mom too. My mom just doesn't get the credit because she's not such a like quirky personality. But my dad was very involved all the way through my childhood. I can remember when my sister and I went off to university, he would like call and ask what our schedules were, and he would write them down and put them on the fridge so that he could just like imagine where we were. And but now he is like the Jenny Holiday booster. He goes around when a book comes out, not this time sadly, but when a book comes out, he goes around and like rearranges the merchandise at bookstores and Walmarts. The things are at eye level. Or when he's a retired teacher and he had a part-time job for a while at Borders, may it rest in peace. So he like knows a little bit about book marketing and which tables are good and stuff like that. Going back to like
Kate Claiborne's dad does the same thing.
Yes.
And I'm like, you guys should like get your dads together. They can go bowling.
Yes. And even my first book, when I had no profile, nobody knew me, nobody reviewed it. He learned how to like filter the reviews on Amazon, and he printed out all the 5-star reviews and like stapled my business card to them and made little packets and handed them out in his town.
That's so nice.
He's almost like a character in a small town romance,
Well, you know what this is going to be my segue. You beat me to it. Is one of the things that's also really interesting about this series is how like multi-generational it is, maybe. Right? Like they're like kind of the town elders and, Nora's sister and Jake's friends. And, how is like, so that also seems like, I mean, not that there weren't characters like that in other books, but it just seems such like maybe like part of that world, going back to that world building.
Right.
So how do you think having that like extended cast of kind of observers in the romances, is that fun to write, or is it something?
No, it's hard.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it, to be honest.
Why do you do it to yourself?
Well, because you don't always know until you're into something,
Yeah.
And I think it's not that I don't enjoy like the result, but there's a lot of characters in these books, and like initially I thought they would be more involved. There's a sort of a secondary. Well, it's not a secondary romance anymore, but there's a older character who's trying to date, but is never wants to go on a date with this other character that's interested in her. He operates the lift bridge in town, and she is just not interested, but she kind of is. So I was originally going to do like a whole secondary romance among that generation, but it just became just too big and too much. I think it's tough because haven't you ever read a book where the main characters are just not on the page together enough, and you're kind of like flipping through
all the time
because you don't care about all the other stuff? So I worry about that.
Well, it's hard, right? Like I'm the same way. I'm like, I want the main characters on the page falling in love all the time, and I want all the things I want, right? I want well-rounded like secondary characters, but I think the other thing though in this case is Jake has been part of this town for a long time, but somehow, right, they should all know him, but because she can see him in a different way, she's new, like she's revealing him to them as well. So I think they function in this book. They do serve an important function, right?
Yeah, and I think they do in the first book too. I mean, it's kind of a joke that they're like the meddling matchmakers, but they really are, in a way that is both annoying but also loving, I guess. So yeah, I think they do play an important role. I mean, I kind of think, look, if I could do it again, maybe there wouldn't be so many of them.
Okay. I'm sorry about my cat in the background, everybody. I'm trying to maybe it's charming. That's Maddie. No. Taking a bath, keeping it clean. I mean, I think that's the part though too, like, so when we like Jake, so I really want to talk about Jake and Nora. I mean, obviously I'm like 30 minutes in, sorry everybody. He's so broken, right? I have like one really specific question, but then I want to talk about him more. After COVID, were you really freaked out that you had written about this is a spoiler only a little bit. It's like revealed at the beginning that he had had a child that died from flu. Like,
No.
Okay.
That sounds stupid, but no,
Okay.
I actually hadn't thought about it until right this very moment. But no,
Okay. Because when I read
I
it, I was like, oh, I bet she's freaking out about this.
no, 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 and I had the idea first for her. She's a doctor, the
Right.
heroine, to be, and there are measles outbreaks
Yeah.
in this part of the world, and I had the idea for her to be kind of taking on this project of like the measles vaccine,
Right.
before the sort of flu aspect came into it, which doesn't really answer your question. But no, I don't. I mean, I worry about a lot of things, but I don't think that's. I mean,
Okay.
it just. I feel like all of our books now are so
Yeah.
out of whack with reality because
Yeah.
like the world just turned inside out overnight, you know?
Right. Like, and yeah, like, so the minefields are maybe like unexpected, right? Like you read something that would have been fine, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I mean, yeah. So like the whole subplot about her, like really making a big effort to like get people vaccinated, right? Like all of that just felt like I was like, wow, Jenny really like read the tea leaves of
Yeah,
like what
no,
was
it
going to
was
be.
just an accident.
um, so let's talk about Jake a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I like loved him, but I like he was hard, like it was painful to read someone who was so alone, maybe.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe a little more painful that he's so alone in this sort of vibrant
Yeah.
and loving community,
Right.
you know, like alone in a crowd.
Yeah. Well, and
Makes it
even
kind of
his
worse.
house, right? Like
Yeah,
even his physical space is so
yeah,
like there but not there, right?
yeah.
Reachable but unreachable.
And, it's not like he doesn't, he hangs out with his two friends every Friday,
Hmm.
but he doesn't talk much, you know? He's kind of like an observer of life rather than a liver of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Nora is also really interesting because she's like, I mean, so she's come to Moonflower Bay essentially. She's like, I'm gonna be there for a couple years. I'm gonna save money. I'm gonna like leave this bad man behind me. So they're both kind of still hiding from the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that way, I think that they're similar. So how do you think that they're like? What is it that makes them such a good pairing, right? Like it's
I don't think she's hiding from the world, actually. I think she's gone on this very like logical quest.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you haven't read the book, she's there, and there really is such a program here,
Mm-hmm.
because medicine is socialized. Like the government pays for everything. They have these programs to try to entice doctors to small towns and rural areas where if you do a certain amount of time, they forgive your medical school
Right.
loans. So for that reason, and because the real estate market is so crazy in Toronto, she
Yeah.
decides, the catalyst is definitely this terrible breakup that she has, but she just decides, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to make some money, change my life up a little bit, have a breather.
Right.
I don't think of her consciously as hiding. I like,
Maybe it's like
which doesn't mean you
recovering.
can't think that, but
Yeah, maybe
um,
recovering is a better word.
yeah,
Because
but
I,
right,
yeah,
but in a like a self-conscious way.
sure.
But she is like Jake and like the best main characters in romance, like a little dumb about
Well,
things,
they have
right?
to be a little dumb
Yeah,
about feelings,
yeah.
right? But I think, like, I guess what I'd say here, so here's, and it really moved me, Jenny. Like, I mean, I have already said this, I cried a bunch, is the way she kind of looks back at her previous relationship or her life in Toronto and wondered, like, this, like, how did it get to this place where I didn't see what was happening?
Right, right. I
And,
think she,
and yeah, go ahead.
well, I think I think she's the sort of proverbial lobster in a pot where, nothing like terrible ever happens, but she, most people probably haven't read the book yet, but was with her ex, was kind of cared about a lot of stuff that she didn't care about, like what kind of furniture they had in the house or what movies they went to, and she truly didn't care, or so she thought. But then she looked back on it as sort of a long process of sort of subsuming her own desires or preferences in favor of his. And it wasn't until she was out of it that she went, oh,
right, look what happened.
Right.
Well, but I think what's interesting about that is because she's so dynamic and vibrant, we as readers are like, we don't understand how that happened either, right? So her kind of journey to kind of figuring that out,
right,
I think is parallel to his journey of like sort of surfacing from this huge like ocean of grief that he uses this like wave metaphor a lot, right?
Right. And I like that word surfacing. When I was disputing, I was saying I don't think she's alone or whatever I said, I can't remember, but they are both surfacing from something, for sure. I like that word.
Yeah, right. We got there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's the part where like she sees him in a new way, and then she's like, he sees me in a way that I haven't been seen, right, in a long time. And I think there's a lot. And I think
sorry, keep interrupting
you. Go. No,
well, I think
I'm talking more, and I don't know why. I'm like
the key. No, that's good. I think why it works for them, I hope, or what I intended, and this isn't a spoiler because it happens like early in the first chapter, is they meet and then they meet again, I think later that same day, because a tourist goes into like emergency labor on the town green, and he knows where she's living because he had this casual conversation with her. She's living in Harold Burgess's house, and so he goes to get her and bring her, and there's this like high stress emergency birth, and I think like the sort of inciting incident of this crazy emergency that they're both at and kind of in charge of, like squishes them together they skip all the niceties, and he doesn't do niceties anyway. Like he would never have occasion to really get to know her other than the fact that they have this dramatic event happen to them.
Well, it's like Keanu Reeves in Speed, right? Like some really dramatic inciting incident will like kind of break through a lot of those barriers. Right. But it's also like a really interesting moment where we see, and I think like Jake, I think it's like, someone is like, she should be FaceTiming with her husband. And he's like, I'm going to get the time face. I can't remember exactly what he says, right? Like, so he is also so, I mean, it's really this like signal of like just how removed he is kind of from the world, right? And one of the ways in which like his surfacing is like about reaching out then to people from his past that he it was too painful for him to like really engage with, right?
Yes. I do think that part of that like anti-technology stance and stuff like that is just his personality too.
Sure. Well, he's building boats and things from scratch and scratch. I don't know, like it's a cake. I don't know.
Instead of the kit.
From ingredients. He made a canoe from ingredients, everybody. I don't know. It's real wild. So I think that that's the part that's like really interesting. Now, Nora, on the other hand, is really connected to her grandmother and her sister. So how do you think like family versus found family is playing out in this book for them?
I don't think it's a dichotomy. It's not like they're not opposed like they often are. And I don't think that's not that that's a bad thing, but in romance, you often have a found family when you don't have like a good real family. But here, I think they both have both. Like Jake's father, he and his father are close. I think they're both kind of wounded, and they're just kind of like gruff guys. But it's not a zero-sum game in this book,
right?
Which I kind of did on purpose because I feel like one of the things about being a romance novelist is it's a volume business, and you get to the point where you think, like I'm doing the same, not the same thing, but I am always telling my agent that I'm like panicking that I'm like repeating myself, and she says, no, that's just your brand. Whatever you think is repetition is just your brand. Anyway, I actually tried purposely to write a story where they have good families.
Yeah, right.
Which is actually much harder for me to do than stories where, they're all traumatized and have cut ties with their families.
I think a lot about how often romance uses like a broken family as
Mm-hmm.
like a reason for a character to be like reticent, right? Like it just feels like a real easy romance shortcut.
Well, it is easy, right?
Sure.
And I've
So
done it
that,
a lot.
yeah, and I'm again no judgment. It
Yeah.
works, right? It works for a reason. And I think a lot of people, the power of romance is like seeing people find love, right? Or like find a love that changes them.
Right.
And so I think it's interesting though to then like set people down in a book where they actually do come from loving families, and then it's a different kind of task, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I once wrote a billionaire book where the billionaire came from a large, loving, totally functional, like squishy, gushy family.
Talk
But I
about
try,
turning
like I
into
said it as a challenge, to myself.
yeah,
But
right,
yeah, I
of
think,
course.
you just, I don't know. I guess this is, I'm going to sound so cheesy when I say this, but I kind of think like, I think about the vibe of series, and like the sort of hard to put into words vibe of this series is more um, like, like you live in this town and the townspeople have your back, and a lot of they don't all have good families, but some of them have good families, and they have these two like sets of friends, these found families. To me, this is about like expansion. Like there's more
Yeah.
room. Like there's not a limited amount of room in your life for love and friendship and relationships.
Yeah, there's
So
always more.
why just let's have it all.
Yeah. Um, tell me, okay, there's like a okay, like a is there anything like is there anything I always am like really curious about like because I don't want to spoil it. You're right, like the book came out today, so I'm like leaving a lot of things on the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
One of the things though that is important, I think, is the way that they relate to each other as like friends and lovers. And like we don't have to talk a lot about it, but I feel like the sex in this book feels really like restorative. Like there's something and I think like you can change the mood of a book too with the way people interact with each other physically,
Mm-hmm.
not just sex, right? In all
Right.
kinds of ways. Is that something you think about consciously, or is it like really driven by like the characters?
Um, well, I do, you do hear this sort of writing advice, which I think is true, that a romance novel, as opposed to erotica, not that there's anything wrong with erotica, like the sex scenes have to move the story forward. There has to be a reason for them besides they're having sex. Um, so, I mean, I may be more or less successful with that with different books, but I think in this book it definitely does move the story forward or develop the characters more. Um, but I think I have to kind of default to my answer that this book just kind of happened. Like I didn't
Yeah.
really, I don't have a good like answer for how I planned that or that I did plan it. It just this, unlike most of my books, this book just was easy.
Yeah.
It
Well,
just sort of like the scenes that need to happen happened. I just wrote it like like linearly, which I don't usually do. So I don't know.
well, I feel like it's really there's something really cohesive and yet like really like it's really high stakes, but also right like there's a real sense that everything that happens really matters between them, but also just like really tender. I mean, I don't know, like there's something about this book that really it just like hit me in all the right places, right? Like it felt cathartic to cry at a romance. It didn't feel like sometimes it
Yeah.
feels manipulative, right?
Right.
And I again, let's no shame in that either. Like
Right.
sometimes I just am like, especially now, I'm like, give me a reason to cry so I
Yeah.
can siphon
Right.
a little of this off. But that's not how this felt. It just felt really beautiful.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about your obsession with grilled cheese, please?
Oh yeah, it's not really an obsession, but it's a pretty good story. So speaking of getting repetitive, so I
You're like my band.
Yeah, so I wrote a lot of like romance is a hustle. I mean, it still is for me. Like we read a lot of books, and I got to the point where I was writing One and Only, and I realized, and no, I was writing a book that came after that, which was an indie book called Undue Influence that was a gay retelling of Persuasion. And I realized that I had written like 3 of my last 5 books had a scene in it where one character was making the other character a grilled cheese. And I had a total panic attack about it. Because 2 of them were published, and one of them was like in copy edits or something. Called my agent, and she says, okay, it's fine. Like, it's not really about the grilled cheese. It's about, you're writing like a caretaking hero. Yeah. And I think in 2 of the books, it was because it was the middle of the night. One character was hungry. The other character, like, not a chef, just sort of a normal person. What do you throw together in the middle of the night? You throw together a grilled cheese. So, okay, she talked me off the ledge, and then I called my editor because we were editing 3 Little Words where he is a chef and there was no grilled cheese in it. And I explained this, and I was like, what if I just start doing this on purpose? Like, what if it becomes like a joke, like an Easter egg? And she's like, love it. So we edited that. So there was a grilled cheese in it. And then I've done it in every book. Sometimes it's like a feature, and sometimes it's just a blink and you miss it thing. I don't think I'm going to do it forever, but I'm also not good at letting jokes die. Like, I will beat a joke into the ground in real life. So I don't know. So for now, there's grilled cheese or a variation. And in this book, it's actually a trout melt because he's a fisherman. And again, it's the middle of the night. He doesn't have a lot of food left. It's New Year's Eve. And so he defrosts some trout and melts some cheese over it. And actually, this book was edited by someone else because my previous editor left. And she, in the comments, she's like, fish and cheese? That's kind of gross. Do you want to make it something else? And I was like, nope, I do not want to make it something else.
Yeah, I was
and this is why. And she was like, oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I kept thinking, I wonder if in the next books it'll just be pizza, right? Like, I had a moment where I was kind of like on grilled cheese watch 2020. And I was like, is it just
right?
pizza?
But there's grilled cheese in this book. Like, he makes it at the festival. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was kind of like waiting, right? I was like, is it just, if it can be pizza takes the place? Because pizza
I'm like, in the theme of expansion in this book. So I'm expanding my carbs and cheese repertoire, content.
Jenny, what do you have coming up next? I mean, so this is out today.
Yes. My next book is out September 13th. It's from Avon, and it's called A Princess for Christmas. It is book 1 of a 3-book Royal Christmas series that is like my take, and there is grilled cheese in it, on the Hallmark Royal Christmas movie, except it's, full of swearing and spicy times, unlike the Hallmark version.
Yeah, that's actually I'm really looking forward to reading that one because it's not really about me, but I'm always like, I don't understand how these people got together and they just have like right?
Well, I love, speaking of my dad is a big fan of Hallmark Christmas movies, and that's kind of what prompted me to think about doing this. I love those movies, but I didn't write that kind of one, but it's in the vein of that, Right.
Well, and I think, it's interesting you're talking about vibe earlier, because I do feel like there's a certain kind of like magic, right? In like a certain kind of vibe to those stories, which I love in December. But it's funny because on NetGalley and Edelweiss, they have all the like Christmas arcs. And I'm always like, I'm not ready. But that's okay. Here's like a comment. I got a couple comments from the chat. So someone named Jessica said, I thought Jake removed himself because after a loss you change. It's hard to be around the people you were close to before because they expect you to return to being the person you were before. It was easier to be himself with Nora because she didn't know him before.
I think that's true. I think that's a astute comment. I also think he removed himself because he didn't want to get better,
Yeah.
And he, I feel like in romance, or in real life, there's sometimes kind of an alchemy to a couple. And it's going to sound so cheesy. I hate sounding cheesy like this. But, until he met her, there was really no reason to get better. Yeah. So it's that she was new, but she was also like the right
person,
kick in the butt.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil it, but I guess I'll say, I'm like trying to how do I say this with it like being vague? I think one of the things that's really interesting in this book is we like really frown upon like the evil ex, and Nora, of course, he's not evil, but right, he's a difficult ex, one who did her wrong. And I think it's really interesting. There's like a sort of like seesaw effect, because at some point Jake has to interact with an ex. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting that it's really different than what you would maybe expect from those interactions, right? There's a lot of surprising ways in which people love each other in this book.
Right. And I don't think it's really a spoiler to say, you know, his relationship with his ex is like the opposite of the evil ex, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think, you know, and I will actually, you know, not so much anymore. I think we're moving away from it, but the sort of evil, like crazy ex-wife was a bad trope for so long, which is why I feel less yucky about having her ex be a jerk.
Yeah.
You know, and his was, you know, someone that he loved, and circumstances broke them apart.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really beautiful. So what will be book 3 in this series then is, I'm really looking forward to it. Let's talk about it.
Book 3 is Law, the bartender, and Maya, the theater owner, who are at, it's not really enemies to lovers, for reasons that you'll find out pretty early on in the first book, but they are definitely, you know, they don't click.
Yeah.
Or they don't think they click.
Everyone else thinks they click, though, it seems.
Right. And luckily they live in a town with a lot of meddling people. So,
what's going to happen?
So the theater's in trouble, which we don't know through these books, but has been in trouble. And she goes on sort of a Hail Mary quest to save it by casting a ex-boy band member who's, you know, he's not modeled on Harry Styles at all, except that he was in a boy band and now he's kind of getting some fame as an actor. Except he's a real jerk. So this boy band guy comes to town, and everybody goes crazy for him, including her. So it seems from the bartender's point of view, and you know, he has no patience for this. And she puts on a play with this guy.
Yeah. So, and when is, so wait, the holiday book is
September, and then the book 3 of this series is March,
okay.
I think 21st, but I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, so that's fast.
Yeah, and then there's another holiday book the next fall.
Yeah, well, there you go. I will say it does seem like you're picking up the right torch to have Jenny Holiday writing some holiday books.
Yeah, no, it's almost, you know, I saw like some people, I don't remember where, they were like, you know, do you think she, like, is that a name just for that series? And I'm like, oh, it's actually unfortunate. It looks like a little too twee, but it is what it is.
Well, you have to just fully embrace that if you're going to write that, you know? Yeah. I think it's totally okay. Jenny, I like to end by asking people if there's something like you wanted to talk about that we didn't.
No, I think that probably most people who watch this, except for all my neighbors and my dad, who I made register so we'd have good attendance, should know that you host a delightful podcast.
I do.
Called Fated Mates. And I'm not really a podcast person, but I just like, and I don't even read, this is bad, I don't really read the books that you guys are reading, but I just enjoy so much you and your co-host Sarah McLean just cackling and, you know, just, it's a delight. So you should check out Fated Mates if you are a podcast person.
I find that one of the things that has been, I try to think of like good things about quarantine times. And one thing that is strangely been really good is that like all these like Zoom book events, which, you know, like I just feel like if you want to, and Linda Watson, who I think is watching, keeps like a calendar. And I just feel like you could see romance people all the time.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty awesome because I feel like it's really a nice, like, I don't know, distraction. It's the opposite of doom scrolling. It's like love scrolling.
For sure. And we were talking before this started, I think when I have done in-store events, like signings, you sit in the bookstore for 3 hours and, you know, a few people come by and some people come by and go, you know, I had one person go, is that a mystery? And I was like, does this look like a mystery? You know? they pick it up and they read it and they put it back down. So this is a lot more fun than that.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, thanks for joining us, and
Thank you.
Everybody. If I think Love Sweet Arrow, if they probably they've signed copies. Is that what
they
have?
Copies
Like
with book plates, signed book plates in them.
Yeah. Well, I guess nobody's really signing actual copies anymore. One day we'll be together.
No, and it was lovely of them to do this. So if you're thinking of ordering a physical copy, you could order it from them. They're an independent bookstore in Greater Chicago.
That's right. I'm actually going to go there on Saturday and do a little book shopping in person with some friends who are going to come, and we're all going to wear masks and stand like 6 feet apart from each other and just, I don't know, be in our... I miss book shopping a lot, everybody.
I know.
All right. Thanks, Jenny. Have a great night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right. I'm going to say end, and then it's just like poof is gone. Like,
okay.
That's what's going to happen. Like,
all right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.